Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Awesome. Today, we're going to be jumping into the 1870s.
Ooh.
We're going to be looking at the world of sin eaters. And our main source for this is Sin Eater by Greg Morgan. Have you had a chance to check that out?
Yes, it's quite a read.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how he blends those historical details.
Oh, absolutely. It's a great way to learn, right? Like you can get that historical fiction, it kind of sucks you in and you learn without even realizing it.
Yeah, exactly. Like sneaky learning.
I like it.
No.
So for anyone who may not know, what is a sin eater?
Well, a sin eater is basically someone who ritually eats.
Okay.
They consume food, and it's supposed to represent the sins of a recently deceased person.
Wow.
And by doing so, they absorb those sins, and it allows the person's soul to enter heaven.
That's such a fascinating concept. It's almost like taking on the burden
Right.
of someone else's, wrongdoings.
Absolutely, like a spiritual scapegoat in a way.
Exactly. And this book, Sin Eater, it centers around this character named Osborn Roche.
Yes.
Now, he's a Civil War photographer, and he's taken portraits of some pretty big names.
Huge names. President Lincoln himself.
Yeah, and even a photo of Lincoln's deceased son, Willie.
Right, which adds this whole other layer, doesn't it? This connection to grief and loss so early on.
Yeah.
Right from the beginning.
Definitely sets the tone, right? But then we see this huge shift. We go from this world-famous photographer to him basically becoming a recluse, living in a cabin in the woods as a sin eater.
It's quite the transformation. It makes you wonder, what leads someone to that kind of life?
Well, in the book, Osborn's wife, Lou, she passes away during childbirth. And this grief is so profound for him that he basically isolates himself. He seeks out this cabin near her grave.
It's like he's trying to be as close to her as possible, even in death.
Right. And the novel really emphasizes his peculiar personality.
Okay.
He has all these odd habits, like he repeats words, avoids physical touch.
Mm-hmm.
And there's even this point where the author kind of draws attention to the fact that he seems to prefer the word peculiar over strange, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Like he's hyper aware of his own, his own eccentricities.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like he's leaning into it almost. Like, I'm not strange, I'm peculiar.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost like these traits, which in any other context might be seen as, maybe a bit odd.
Yeah.
They actually make him uniquely suited for this role as a sin eater.
Right, because sin eaters were traditionally seen as outcasts. People were afraid of them.
Yeah.
So being comfortable with solitude and silence would almost be a prerequisite for the job, wouldn't it?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So his isolation and his peculiar habits, these things just make his eventual turn to sin eating even more intriguing.
Right.
It
is, yeah. Because you have this man who documented reality through his lens.
Right.
As a Civil War photographer.
Right.
Someone you would expect to be grounded in the tangible.
Absolutely.
But yet he finds himself drawn to this ancient, almost mystical practice.
Right. And it really makes you wonder, is this like a genuine spiritual journey for Osborn? Or is it, a way to just cope with his grief?
Yeah.
Is he seeking solace, or is he simply trying to make sense of a world that suddenly feels chaotic and unpredictable?
That's a good question. And the novel, it doesn't really give you, easy answers.
Right.
But I think it brings up this important point about, the role of ritual and superstition, not just in the past, but even today.
Yeah.
How do we make sense of things we don't understand?
Right. And he's not completely alone, though, right? He has his faithful bloodhound, Lincoln.
Always by his side.
Always there. And then there's this mule.
Junior. Don't forget Junior.
Yes.
He's a very special mule, isn't he?
This mule is incredibly intelligent. He can always find his way home. It's almost symbolic, right? Even when Osborn is trying to isolate himself, there's this connection, this pull back to the world.
Definitely. Junior represents that link to life, to hope, even in the midst of all that sorrow. And speaking of connections, there's another group of characters we need to talk about, the Fenn family.
Yes, the Fenns. They're a family of weepers. And I know that might sound a little strange to modern ears.
Oh, yeah.
But basically, they were women who were paid to mourn at funerals. It was like a profession.
It was, and a vital one at that, helping families process their grief, especially in a time when people weren't really encouraged to express their emotions openly.
Right. And the Fenns, they're this multi-generational family.
Yes. Led by Charlotte, Everyone calls her the Mrs.
The Mrs., yeah. And
Yeah.
she's got her daughter, Little Miss, who's a bit of a rebel.
A little bit, yeah.
And then there's Dierdre, the granddaughter. She's the curious one, always asking questions.
Always observing, taking it all in.
Right. And the relationship with Osborn, particularly Charlotte's, is really interesting. She's very suspicious of him.
Understandably so. I mean, sin eaters were often viewed with suspicion, even fear.
Yeah, she sees sin eating as this dying tradition, something that's fading away in the face of progress and modernity.
Right. And she's a woman who's very much rooted in tradition. It's all she's ever known.
So we've got this world of sin eaters and weepers, and it's like, tradition is bumping up against progress.
Yeah, it's like this constant tension. You can feel it, right?
Oh, absolutely. And then there's all this, love and second chances kind of woven into it. It's a lot.
It is, but it's so well done. Like, you really feel for these characters. They're trying to figure things out, make choices, and the weight of, what's expected of them is just, it's always there.
Right, exactly. And it's like you can see how that plays out in their relationships.
Oh, absolutely. Like with Ray and Little Miss.
Yeah, them. There's definitely something there, but it's like Osborn's whole sin eater thing. It's kind of a barrier between them.
Yeah, it's this unspoken obstacle.
Yeah.
You can feel that tension. Like, can they overcome that stigma?
Right. And it's funny because Little Miss, she's grown up with all these traditions, right?
Yeah.
But she's got this rebellious streak.
Oh, totally. She's drawn to Ray, to his, worldliness.
Yeah.
He represents something different.
Totally, totally. Can we take a step back and talk about sin eaters in general?
Sure.
Were they real? I mean, what was their place in society?
Well, the novel obviously fictionalizes a lot of aspects, but the concept of sin eaters, it does have historical roots.
Okay.
They were often social outcasts, individuals who lived on the fringes of society.
Right.
And they were feared and revered.
Really?
Yeah, in equal measure, almost like a, kind of a mystical figure.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that they were a known thing. I always thought that it was kind of more folklore.
Well, there's a grain of truth to a lot of these, stories.
Right.
And their role was, to either literally or symbolically take on the sins of the deceased.
Oh, wow. Okay, so the novel describes the ritual.
Yes.
In detail.
Yes.
And it involves a plate of food being placed on the deceased's chest and then the sin eater consuming it.
Yeah.
And I've got to say, it's a pretty visceral image.
It is.
It's both repulsive but also strangely compelling.
Yeah.
What do you make of the symbolism there?
Well, the use of food in rituals is fascinating. I mean, across so many cultures, food acts as this kind of conduit,
Okay.
A way to connect with, the divine, with ancestors, even the deceased.
Okay.
And so in this case, the sin eater's act of consumption, I mean, it could be seen as a form of sacrifice,
Okay.
almost like a way to appease the spirits or ensure safe passage for the departed soul.
So it's not just about eating a meal, right?
Right,
It's about assuming a burden,
Right.
responsibility for the sins of another.
It's a heavy thing.
Yeah. And that raises another question, which is, what did people believe happened to the sin eater
Oh, yeah.
after they performed this ritual?
Right, right.
Did they carry those sins with them?
Well, that's where things get really, really interesting because some folklore, it suggests that sin eaters were condemned
Oh, wow.
to wander the earth forever burdened by all those sins they consumed.
Oh,
But others believe that they served a necessary function.
okay.
They were acting as these intermediaries between the living and the dead.
Interesting.
Yeah. So their role was almost shamanistic,
Okay.
a way to restore balance and order
Yeah.
to the community.
It makes you wonder about the psychological toll.
Oh, yeah.
This role must have taken on the sin eater.
Right.
I mean, to carry the weight of other people's transgressions, to be both feared and relied upon,
Yeah,
that's a heavy burden to bear.
absolutely. And the novel captures this tension so well.
Yeah.
You see Osborn wrestle with his own doubts, his own fears, even as he's finding this sense of purpose
Right.
in providing this service to the grieving. Exactly. And Sin Eater does a great job of showing that.
It really makes you think, right? Can people actually find redemption when they're constantly being judged?
I think that's the core of what Sin Eater is all about.
Yeah, it's not a simple good versus bad story, is it?
Not at all. It's messy. It's real life. People making tough choices, trying to figure things out.
And one of the most amazing things to me is how Osborn, he goes from being like this total outcast to actually being part of the community. He starts doing those free portraits for people who can't afford them.
He's using his talent to give back, to connect with the community. It's really beautiful.
It is. It's like he's saying, hey, look, I'm more than just this label, you know?
Yeah, yeah, he was more than that. He was a human being with a heart.
And the community, they started to see that, didn't they?
Slowly but surely, the fear started to fade. And it's interesting, right? Like, it was his kindness, his willingness to help others that changed their minds.
And Sin Eater does a great job of showing that, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It makes you think about your own life, about the people you connect with, and why.
It's a really powerful story, and I think everyone should check it out.
I agree. It stays with you long after you finish it. Makes you think about forgiveness, about second chances, about what really matters in life.
And on that note, we're going to wrap things up for today. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Sin Eater.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed exploring this world of sin eaters and weepers with us. It's a fascinating story with so much to unpack.
And who knows? Maybe it even made you think about your own beliefs, your own judgments, and the power of second chances.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those deep dives going.